come at me in the comments. I dare you. But try to be nice about it, okay? Moving on! You know what I've realized? I am always so close to the camera, but it feels so weird to be this far away. Like, okay, here's the beginning of my video. Let me fix this. Okay. I think we're all right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Leandra the TBR0 and I'm gonna be covering a 2-month wrap-up. Yes, that's not usually what I do, but at this point, I don't know what my usual wrap-ups are because I keep changing them. Because this is the hardest video for me to record at the end of every month, I don't know how you all do it, especially because in 2024, I've been reading more books than ever before. And so when I get to that 30th, 31st, and I look at all of the books I've read, I'm just like, there's too many. There's too many for me to discuss because in April I read 19 books and in May I read 21. Have I been saying March? I think that's right. I don't know what I'm doing. We're in May. We're fine. We're gonna move forward. Meaning that in the course of 2 months of 61 days, I read 40 books. How do you expect me to discuss them? So instead, we're switching things up. I'm just gonna keep experimenting until I decide on a wrap up that actually works for me. I'm gonna be doing a superlatives version. I ended up being inspired by Danni because I was complaining to her about how I just don't know how to do my wrap ups, and she suggested this, so we're just gonna go with the flow. It actually works out really well for me because I do have a bullet journal, and the way I do my monthly spreads is I do it in a bit of a sandwich format. So every month I start off with a calendar and you can see the days, what I read each day, just to kind of help me keep track. And then I have my individual spreads for each review that I do. Do I review every single book? Heck no. And then at the end, I have a spread, just one sheet, where I hand out superlatives. I ended up starting this last year because I realized that there are so many books that I don't get to highlight, and maybe they weren't a 5-star, but I still really loved them for a certain element. So that's kind of where it started. And I will be adapting that to my wrap up today. As I mentioned, I read 40 books. There are not 40 superlatives I'll be covering, so some books just aren't going to be mentioned, and that's the way the cookie crumbles. Does that mean I hated these books, loved them, found that they were meh? Honestly, all of the above. It really depends on which superlative I'm covering, but I did try to spread things out. I think every superlative in which I gave an award, I have a different book. Maybe only once or twice did I repeat titles, and that was a conscious decision for me. Were there some books that probably deserved more than one award? Yes, but I kind of want to highlight as many books as I can, and that's the way we're doing it. There are going to be some titles that you will see when I do the run through of every single book I read each month that you won't see me talk about beyond that. Not because they didn't deserve a certain award, because some of them totally did, whether they were great awards or awards that no title should ever want to win, but I can't talk about them because they're for future projects, and I just want to keep everything secret so that when it comes out, we have the best of time with those vlogs, and that's going to be coming out in June, so just wait. Before we get into the superlatives though, let's just do a quick roll call of every single book I read in March and in April. Trent's Last Case, Past Crimes, Other People's Comfort Keeps Me Up at Night, Barbarian's Redemption, Barbarian's Lady, Welcome to Night Vale, The Spare Man, Death and Fromage, Lunar New Year Love Story, Monstrilio, These Names Make Clues, Hate, The Lost World, The Tainted Cup, Goddess of Filth, Carmilla, Amari and the Night Brothers, Lavender House, A Walk in the Woods. And now for April, Cascade Failure, The Dry, One Puzzling Afternoon, All Systems Red, All Systems Red, Soulless, My Murder, A Prayer for the Crown Shy, Dead Dead Girls, Green Fuse Burning, The City of Brass, Assistant to the Villain, Hood Feminism, Hookie, Radiant Heat, There Should Have Been 8, The Manor House, Wickwire Watch, The Sunbearer Trials, The Maid, and The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender. Okay, now that we've covered all 40 titles, let's finally talk about the superlatives. The first superlative that I'm going to give out is Best Lead, and there are 2 versions to this. The first award is going to be for the character that I loved from beginning to end. I knew that they were for me. I absolutely adored them. They can do no wrong in my eyes, from the first page to the last page. The second award I'll be giving out is to the character that grew on me. Maybe they weren't as noticeable in the beginning of the book, or their character actions, their depictions weren't really hitting in the same way, but then they kind of grew on me throughout the entire narrative. The immediate best lead was Mosscap from A Prayer for the Crown Shy. I love that robot so much. It's the best character, and I would do anything. Genuinely, I would do anything for Mosscap. The second version of my best lead, the one that grew on me, was actually Sarah Harding. This was from The Lost World, and she was just kind of a side character character at the beginning. I didn't really notice her as much. And then she was the lead. She was the heroine. She was the hero. She's the one that saved everyone. And I just, oh my gosh, I loved her. I loved how action-packed her scenes were. And I would honestly like choose her to protect me at all costs more than any of the other men in the book. My next superlative is best supporting character. There are so many supporting characters that I loved throughout many of these books, but the one award I'll be giving is Elsie, the were-dragon in Amari and the Night Brothers. I'm 99% sure her name's Elsie. I should have double checked this. Either way, I love her. She is such a great supporting friend to Amari. I really loved her personality, her backstory. She was pretty unique as a character, and that's exactly the kind of friend that Amari needed. And now for the first of many superlatives that no title or author would really want. That is the worst lead. And hands down, oh, well, maybe not hands down, there are actually a lot of leads that I really didn't like, and quite a few of them could have taken this award home, but I have settled on Madison Kate because I never want to hear her name again. Okay, as someone who adores mysteries, of course I have to include a couple superlatives that are mystery focused, and those include favorite solo detective, so a detective who pretty much solves the case on their own, they don't really have a sidekick, and then we have favorite detective duo. So this could be the Sherlock-Watson dynamic or just two equal partners working together to solve the case. For solo detective, there were a couple that I could have chosen, but I've decided to go with Aaron Falk from The Dry. If you want to hear more about my thoughts for that particular book, I did vlog it in the Can We Trust Crystal vlog. Because he won the award for favorite solo detective, you can probably assume how much I liked the book. But yeah, I really liked him. He was a go-getter and he had to experience a lot of adversity, a lot of blame, false blame on his part to try to find the solution, not only to a cold case, but to a modern crime. And I really liked him. He did have a few people kind of helping him along the way, but I would argue for the most part, he was on his own. For favorite detective duo, oh my gosh, I did not need to think. I didn't need to think about this. This was Anna and Din from The Tainted Cup. I love them. They are the perfect duo. Honestly, they are a Sherlockian reimagining duo, so it's not surprising, and I think they're better. They're 100% better than Sherlock and Watson, which actually isn't that dramatic of a statement. Most Sherlockian reimaginings have better duos than the original Sherlock and Watson. You heard me right. Come at me in the comments. I dare you. But try to be nice about it, okay? My next superlatives are actually expanding the judgment a little bit to overall cast. So I have best cast and I also have worst cast. There were many options for worst cast, let me tell you, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For the best cast, I did kind of have a hard time because there were some really lovely casts that went deep. So not just the main characters that I love, but I really love the supporting characters as well. I ended up deciding to go with Soulless because that had a really great deep cast of characters. All of them were humorous or odd or like just exciting in their own way. So I definitely had to choose that. For worst cast, as I mentioned, there were quite a few. I actually have 3 titles in mind. One of them I actually can't talk about. Interesting for you. Stay tuned to June. But the one that I am gonna stick to is Monstrilio. That book. That book. If you want to hear my thoughts on that book, I also did a vlog in which I did my Meet the Booktuber for Lauren, who I absolutely love. Happy Haunts Library, she's the best. That book is not though. Oh, those characters were the worst. It's fine, we're gonna move on. Narrowing our focus a little bit more, I had to do best couple and worst couple. That one actually was hard until I had to rethink some of the subplotting in certain books, and then I was like, oh, I know who the worst couple was. For best couple, I had to choose Tesla and Shaw. There were a few other contenders, but I loved these lovebirds. They ended up actually being newlyweds in this space mystery, and it was just the cutest thing. Oh my gosh, they are goals. They're goals. And then we get to the worst couple. This is a title that I don't think anyone really who watches this, or only a couple of you, will have even recognized. It's Trent's Last Case. This is by E.C. Bentley. It is from the 1910s. It's a classic pre-Golden Age novel that I ended up reading for research for She Done It, the podcast I work for. And there was a very odd coupling that I thought hindered the story and just like in a really odd light. I don't know how to describe it, and I don't want to give it away in case anyone does want to read this. I mean, there are some people who love the pre-Golden Age or love the Golden Age because, I mean, who doesn't? But that That was really weird. Yeah, I didn't like that coupling. These next superlatives do come straight from my bullet journal because I have an entire section dedicated to setting superlatives. I just realized in the last year how important setting can be, how it can make or break a narrative, and how it impacts the way characters react to certain conflicts or obstacles in their way. So with my first setting superlative, we're gonna go for the most elaborate setting. That one, like, very clearly goes to City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I ended up doing that for a vlog thanks to Exo Joe because she was my fourth Meet the Booktuber, and it was a really interesting time. It was outside my comfort zone, but it's clearly so elaborate. There's so much detail, not only applied to Cairo because it's 18th century, so this is historical fiction, but also to the land of David because there's so many like political and cultural differences. There's such a rich history for those creatures or characters, I guess you'll call them. And yeah, it was super elaborate. Oppositely, my least elaborate setting award goes to These Names Make Clues. This is by E.C.R. Lorac, and I am arguing that it's the least elaborate, mainly because it's a kind of classic estate mystery. A murder occurs during this house party, and what is unique about it is that this house is actually in London, but you don't really realize it. It could be moved anywhere. So I would argue for the most part, it's not that elaborate. It doesn't actually impact the plot as much as I would like. Now, for most fun setting and least fun setting, these ones are kind of weird answers, partially because for most fun, I could pick a lot of books, a lot of titles for this, but I did want to also provide as much diversity among the books I chose as possible. Again, trying not to choose the same title over and over again, even though there are some titles in mind that fit a lot of these criteria. But for most fun, I went with Death and Fromage. This is just such a fun, cozy series for me. I really enjoy every time I pick it up, and I really like the dynamic between Richard and Valerie. They're actually a really fun duo too, and you can't take it seriously. It's written by a comedian, so that honestly explains it. It's also set in the French countryside, but like there's an Airbnb that Richard really shouldn't be running, but he is, and so it's very humorous, and that's why I think it would be a really fun, light setting with a little bit of murder. For least fun setting, this might be a bit weird, but I'm choosing A Walk in the Woods. This is nonfiction, mainly because I do love hiking. I love walking, I love the outdoors, but there are some scenarios in which the author, Bill Bryson, describes like crime, some anecdotes that are really terrifying, some hikers that just never made it off the trail for various reasons, and I was like, that doesn't sound very fun. So that's why I'm choosing that one for the least fun setting. Ooh, and now we're getting to most impactful and least impactful. And I did break up most impactful because I realized that setting is a pretty broad term. It could include timeline, the environment or world building surrounding the characters. So I kind of broke it up that way. So for most impactful, I chose for time period is going to be Lavender House. A lot of the actions, a lot of the behaviors and choices made by the characters were distinctly because of the fact that they were living in 1950s, especially because it's a cast of majority queer characters. For my world building, I ended up choosing Welcome to Night Vale. It's just such a bonkers book, and it's mainly because Night Vale as a town or city is just so unique, and it heavily impacts the characters, what they believe is normal and what they believe is abnormal, and just the way that they react to conflicts. It's very, very clearly because of the setting. It's clearly because of the world, because of Night Vale, and how it's designed. I know that sounds weird, but like honestly, go read it. It was my favorite book of the month I read it for March. And for my least impactful, this one was kind of tough because I typically do gravitate towards reads that will have rich settings. I've found that actually, and if the setting along with other factors aren't really intriguing me, I kind of will DNF it. But I ended up deciding for Carmilla. This one is the classic pre-Dracula that is like very gothic and just arguably could be anywhere. Like, I don't know, during that time period, maybe the writing style is very much that time period, but I don't think that the setting of this kind of secluded castle, it could be any secluded castle, I suppose, or any secluded estate, and I didn't think it was that impressive of a setting, but I also don't think that the authors of that time were really thinking as that distinctly. Like, they were providing atmospheric settings, but not really settings that really mattered as far as why the characters acted the way they did, I would argue. I could be wrong. And now these ones are just a bit more general. We went from characters to setting to just kind of general vibes, and that includes fastest read and slowest read. For my fastest read, it definitely was All Systems Red. This isn't surprising. It's a very short book. It's a very short novella. Let me show you. I mean, look how tiny that thing is. And I ended up listening to it on audio. That's probably why I listened to it twice. I literally read this book twice in the month that I read it because I couldn't get enough, and it was such an easy read. I actually went for a walk one time and just finished it while I was walking. I just kept walking, and then the book was done, and I was like, well, that was quick. Hence why it is getting my fastest read superlative award. For the slowest, I'm gonna go with City of Brass, mainly because it was the biggest book I read, but I also took multiple weeks to read it. I was juggling other reads, so that was impacting a lot of the reason why it took me so long, because there were times when I was reading it only on my Tuesday reading sprints. I host Tuesday reading sprints from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. every single Tuesday, Eastern Standard Time, and 2 weeks in a row, that was the only time I was reading The City of Brass, so that's why it was slower, but I think that that's also a valid reason for why it is receiving the slowest read. Ooh, and now we're getting to most likely reread and least likely reread. This is hilarious because I really don't reread books, but I ended up having it anyway. So for most likely reread, I have a very specific reason why I would reread this book. I'm choosing The Wickwire Watch, and that's mainly because my caveat would be I would reread it physically. I ended up reading it on audio because that was the only way I had access to it, and it was a buddy read with Danni over at Danni.Dabbles. She ended up having the ebook and the audio, so I was actually really fortunate to be reading it with her. So if there were things I missed or I was confused about, she could just kind of fill me in. But it was a read that I think I would have gotten more out of if I had the physical copy. So I'm kind of being a bit practical in my choice of reread, and I'm gonna stick by it. Now, for my least likely reread, I easily could probably choose anything I gave 3 stars or lower, but I wanted to make this a bit more difficult for myself, at least in video form. So I had to make myself choose a 4-star or higher, and I'm going with One Puzzling Afternoon. I'm pretty sure I ended up giving it 4.25 stars. I cried. I really liked the main character. She was an elderly woman who had dementia, and oh my gosh, the impact that it had on her memory, on her relationships, and her struggle to remember a crime that happened when she was a young girl and just being desperate to solve it. I was just moved. I was really intrigued and I found it really fascinating, but the reason why I wouldn't reread it is because I cried. I am just such a sucker, I guess, or I'm really emotional when it comes to anything that is dealing with memory or terminal illness. So for instance, if someone has dementia or Alzheimer's or is struggling with a terminal illness like cancer, I am a wreck. I'm guaranteed to cry, and sometimes I just don't want to cry. And so I picked up this book not knowing it was an ARC, so I'm very grateful to the publisher for providing it to me. Thank you, Source Books. But I wasn't emotionally ready. It kind of wrecked me, and I just know that I could not bring myself to reread that because of how much it made me cry multiple times throughout the book. Ooh, okay, so we only have 2 awards left, or actually technically 4, but at the heart, they're 2 themes, and I just included them in 2024. I think I mentioned this, but last year I did Superlatives and I kind of revamped it for the new year, and these were 2 last minute adds, mainly because I realized that I'm really fascinated by my new to me versus veteran authors ratio. I tend to read new to me authors more often than not. I think last year it was about 75% of the books I was reading were coming from new to me authors, and I find that really fascinating, so I decided to provide awards for that kind of theme. So one is favorite new to me author of the month, or in this case, the 2 months for March and April. Have I been saying March? I think that's right. I don't know what I'm doing. We're in May. We're fine. We're going to move forward. And then also my favorite veteran author. And now, because I'm doing this in video form, I'm of course going to provide the opposite. So my least favorite veteran author and my least favorite new to me author. So for my favorite ones, we're going to start with the positive, end with the negative. I probably shouldn't do that, but here we are. So my favorite new to me author is Jane Harper. I really enjoyed The Dry. I didn't give it 5 stars, but I feel like she is going to be a staple modern mystery author for me, someone that I can always lean on, especially if I'm in a slump, because it was such an easy read for me, and I'm really looking forward to kind of getting more experience with her canon. So yes, Jane Harper. You and me. Meanwhile, my favorite veteran author ended up being Katie Williams. I read My Murder and I really enjoyed it. And this was a surprise veteran author for me because when I picked it up, when I borrowed it from the library, I actually didn't realize I'd read something by her before until I started looking into it. And I realized that I read her debut novel, which was Tell the Machine Goodnight. I really loved it. I think I gave it 4 stars. I might have given it 5. And it's a book I just don't think enough people talk about. Meanwhile, her second book, My Murder, has had a lot more press, a lot more praise, and also some controversy because people don't really know how to categorize it. I understand. It's a very unique book. I'll just say that. And having read My Murder, I basically have decided I will read anything that Katie Williams produces at this point because she's been 2 for 2. And now for the flip side. My least favorite new to me author is Cascade Failure. I don't even remember who that author was, but that book was terrible. I think I gave it 1.5. I genuinely don't remember who the author is. I guess I've just decided to erase her from my mind. Moving on. So my least favorite veteran author is Ruby Dixon. Oh no, I've read over a dozen books by her at this point, thanks to Ice Planet Barbarian Sprints with Brittany Loves Reading. And I think she and I are just, and by she I mean Brittany, we've agreed that we're kind of getting done with Ruby Dixon. We only have 4 more books in the series to go, and we do have plans to celebrate that in kind of a fun way sometime in the summer. Deets to come. But oh God, these were 2 not great books, and we need some space from Ruby. So yeah. And that is my quasi wrap up for March and April. I actually think that this was very low stress, and I do recognize I pretty much told you nothing about the 40 books I read, and I guess I'm okay with that. You know from the vibe if I really enjoyed it, if I didn't. I am hoping to provide at least a star rating for the books I can tell you about with the graphics when I was doing the sound off, and then you kind of get the gist. If I gave it a 5 star, clearly I recommend it. If I gave it 1 star, clearly I'm telling you stay away. If you had a good time, this is your reminder to consider liking the video, maybe subscribe, and comment below letting me know that you enjoyed this format. Or oppositely, if you have a superlative that you think I should include, I will 100% take suggestions because I feel like mine are all pretty basic and I would love to get some weird ones in there because that just spices things up. All right, thank you all so much for getting to the end. I really do appreciate you and I hope to see you in the next one.